Hi everyone, welcome back. Today's video is going to be somewhat of a palette smackdown. When I initially did my first impressions video of the Naked 3 palette, I held it up against the Lorac Unzipped palette just so you guys could get a quick comparison of the similarities and the differences between these two palettes because they are very, very similar. And it created a little bit of a discussion on that video and some questions, so I thought I would do a follow-up where I actually swatch and find where there is overlap between the two palettes. And actually I've done one eye in the Unzipped palette and one eye in the Naked 3 palette. And I'll let you look at it while I'm shooting this video, and at the end I'll reveal which eye is which, and you can determine if they are very similar or very different. This is something you can determine for yourself. So I wanted to start off by first saying what I noticed when I was swatching. So basically what I did was I went through this palette and tried to find a color that was close to it in this palette. And because there are fewer colors in here, that's why I did it from this palette to that palette. So what I found was there were three colors that there was no match for at all. I couldn't even get close. It was like, no. The tones were totally different, the finishes were totally different. There were three colors that were really close. Maybe like a little shade different, a half shade different, maybe the finish was a tiny bit different, but when I looked at them on my hand, I thought they were close enough that if I were doing an eye look, it wouldn't make a huge difference one way or the other. And there were four that I thought were a match. And I do that air quote thing because, they're not an exact match, they're really, really close. When you're using them, you're not going to be able to tell the difference. When you look at them swatched side by side, maybe you can tell the difference, maybe not. So the only other thing I wanted to comment on is that the Lorac palette has 4 matte shades to it. So if you are really a matte lover, you might like this one a little bit better because the Urban Decay only has 3 matte shades. And so if you're not really into shimmer that much, maybe you would like the Lorac a little bit better. It also does not have any glittery shades in it. They are shimmery, but nothing is really super glittery. Whereas the Naked 3, this color here called Dust, definitely has glitter in it. It's one of probably the glitteriest shades in the palette. So the other major difference I noticed was that the colors in the Naked 3 palette definitely have cooler undertones to them. The Lorac is definitely a warmer undertone. So if you know that you do better with cooler undertones or warmer undertones, that could also influence your decision one way or the other. If you don't care, then you have other things you need to consider. Then as far as pigmentation goes, both have really great pigmentation. I would say these two makeup brands are in my top probably 3 or 4 brands. I love the formula that they have. However, it's interesting when you're swatching side by side, you really notice like little nuance differences, and I think that the Lorac feels a little bit harder and the Urban Decay feels a little bit softer. When you're actually using them, you don't really notice that. You only notice that when you run your finger on the pan and you go, oh, this doesn't feel quite as soft as this one. So, I'm really picking nits here. The formulas are virtually the same. So, let me get started with sharing which ones I felt were a good match. And the first is this lightest color. It's called Undercover in the Lorac palette. and it's called Strange in the Naked 3. And there's a hand swatch. I would say, again, this is where on the hand they look virtually the same. When I look at the finger swatch, the Naked 3 looks a little pinker. Has a little bit of a pinker undertone. The next color that I found moving across the palette is Unbelievable. This one here. And I felt that Trick was the best color match for that. And here's Trick here. So I feel like these have very similar finishes, the same color depth. They have slightly different tones, but they're very, very close. So the next shade moving across the palette is Unattainable. I could not find a match for this in the Naked palette at all. It's really a beautiful, warm, kind of toasty color. But there was no match for it in the, nothing even close in the Naked 3 palette. Okay, moving across the palette is Unconditional. And this is a matte shade. And I felt that Limit was the best match for that, which is here. However, it is a little bit lighter. But the tones were very close, which is why I felt that if you were doing a makeup look, they would probably be undiscernible on the eye. So you can see here is the Lorac, and here is, I said that backwards. Here's the Lorac, and here is the Naked 3. So I think they look more different on the finger swatches than they do on the hand swatches, which is why I felt that these were a good match, or dupe if you want to call it a dupe. So to finish out the top row on the Lorac palette is Unbridled, and that's here. It's another matte shade. The Factory was the best match, although the finish is a little bit different because Unbridled is a matte and Factory has a little bit of shimmer to it. But, you know, my goal here was to really kind of come up with as many close colors as I could. So this is Urban Decay Factory, this is Unbridled. And I think, you know, this looks a little lighter on the finger because it does have a little bit of a shimmer to it. But again, when you get it on the hand, the color tone is similar, the finish is not. But I felt that they could probably be used interchangeable in most looks. Moving to the bottom row of the Unzipped palette is, the first color is Undiscovered, and that's here. I could not find a match for this at all. That's one of the ones that could not be matched. The next one is Unreal, here. And I really struggled with this decision. I ultimately chose Dust as the dupe for this, but they are different in tone and finish. And but I felt like the intensity of the color was probably would be a good match in an eye look. So this is the Urban Decay Dust, and it has a little bit more of a glittery finish, and it's a little bit pinker. And this is Unreal. Actually looks a little bit peachier. I'm not sure these are even showing up. because they are a pretty light shade. So the next color in this palette is Uncensored. There was no dupe for this. Then Unspoken here. I felt that the dupe for that would be Nooner from the Naked 3. They're both a matte and a great blending shade. Again, in my viewfinder, I can tell the difference that one's a little warmer and one's a little cooler. So this is the Lorac and that is the Naked 3. Alright, the last one in this swatch fest is Untamed, and that's here. And the best match, and this is really an excellent match, is Darkhorse from the Lorac, from the Naked. Darkhorse and Untamed. So when on the hand swatch, this does have a little bit more of a gray undertone, but they're really so very similar. So that's my in-depth look at the two palettes where there is overlap. They're different. They are different. So let me go ahead and share with you what I did. I'm going to go ahead and get a little bit closer. I hope you've been watching my eyes this whole time to see if you could tell which palette did which eye. So up close you can see that they are not an exact match, but when you're standing talking to me face to face you probably don't notice that I have different shades on each eye. But when you look at this, you probably can tell. I started with a primer, the same primer on both eyes, and I deliberately chose colors that were not exact matches to do this eye look, because I really wanted you to see the subtle differences. I mean, it would have been easy to just make an eye look match exactly, and I wanted to do one where they weren't exactly a match. So obviously for my brow color I used the lightest shade in both palettes, and I don't think there's any discernible difference there. So on my lid I used Unreal and Dust. In my crease I used Unconditional and Limit. And then as my accent color I used Untamed and Darkhorse. So this side I used the Unzipped palette. And this side I used the Urban Decay. So you can see this, I think this eye looks a little warmer in tone than this one. Similar, but yet subtly a little different. Both beautiful. So here are my parting words on this palette smackdown. I think if you have neither palette, you have a decision to make. Do you like warmer tones or cooler tones? Or if you like more matte shadows in your palette, or you don't really care that much. So if you like warmer tones, you would want this. If you like more mattes, you would probably want this. If you like cooler tones, this is probably a better choice. If you like more shimmery choices, this is probably your better choice. And this one overall, if you like more colors in general to choose from, because there are 12 as opposed to 10. So if you already own the Lorac palette, do you need the Naked 3? And I'm going to say no. I don't think you do. I don't think you need both. So, you know, for me, need has very little to do with it. I wanted both. I mean, I already owned the Lorac Unzipped, but I wanted the Naked 3. So, you know, this isn't a judgment. I'm not judging you. If you want both, get both. If you have both, terrific. I have both. So, and I will enjoy both. They can both, you know, do slightly different things. So, I hope you found this video helpful. If you did, please give it a thumbs up and leave me some comments below what your thoughts are. Are you going to do one or the other or both? And I will see you in my next video. Thank you. Bye-bye.